Y'all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. I know at 10:30, all us San Diegans were looking outside, wondering if it was still raining to determine if we left our homes or not. A lot of times people ask for, we call this intro to Buddhism and meditation, so very often people ask for the advanced teachings, and the good news is I have them for you today. Some of you know me well enough to know that's a bunch of nonsense, right, everyone? Yeah. It's the sutra the Buddha taught very clearly about wearing 2 pairs of socks. Y'all know that one? Never heard it? No, neither have I. But as I was coming in and I saw 2 different people, I won't, embarrass them, or actually I should praise them for their wisdom is what I should be doing. But they put on 2 pairs of socks. Why? It's cold, right? That is what we call wisdom. The Buddhist teachings, there's 2 wings that make it work: wisdom and compassion. And very often people get so wrapped up in like these deep esoteric Buddhist things, right? And sometimes it really is as simple as just, you're cold, put on 2 pairs of socks. And I say that jokingly, but also very seriously, because that's a metaphor for everything in our life. Most things in our lives, not everything. I don't even know if I'll go as far as to say most, because I don't want to, put anyone into a box. But many things in our lives, I feel safe saying that. Many things in our lives have a very simple, wise option that will minimize and reduce majority, if not all, of our suffering. The question is, are we wise enough to recognize what that decision is and just simply put it into action? Right? And if you watch, even just today, just go through your day today and just explore when things arise that are causing you discomfort, right? The Buddha called this dukkha. Discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction, suffering, whatever word you want to apply to it from whatever book you've read. When these things arise, just look at the situation and say, is there a simple solution? Is there a simple answer that I could just do and minimize suffering? It's not always going to be that easy. It's not always going to be as easy as recognizing you just need another pair of socks. But very often, it can be. But we often default into complaining, making it much bigger than it is, the problem, telling everyone about it. And we've almost talked ourselves into a situation where there is seemingly no answer, because we've sat with it for minutes and hours and weeks and months and years. We've told everybody about it. We've created this massive problem. So then, of course, since we've sat with it as this huge dilemma for so long, then it no longer seems like there's a simple solution. But many things there really are. And for me, Buddhist practice has always been something that the intention of the practice is really simple. Just practice kindness. And if you're kind towards yourself, then you can begin to carry that out and be kind towards others. And a lot of times, these two, the awareness of these two, the kindness or compassion and wisdom, they really do play together very well. So having compassion towards yourself, being kind towards yourself, recognizing your feet are cold, put on socks. It's that simple. Recognize where you're hurting. Where in your life do you hurt? Where's the pain? Where's the suffering? Explore it. Investigate it. And see, is there a simple, relatively easy solution that can at least minimize or decrease some of the suffering that we're sitting with? Again, this isn't going to solve all of your problems, but it'll help you become aware of them and maybe figure out what could we change to have some more compassion towards self. And then when we kindness and compassion towards ourselves, then it makes it a lot easier to bring that kindness and compassion out into the world and into others. So with that being said, good morning to all of those of you who are at home joining us virtually. Thanks for showing up. We'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice when you don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right? Are you doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Relaxing the shoulders. If you're on a bench or chair, however you are seated, same, relaxing the shoulders. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator. It just means you have an itch or your leg hurts. So simply move, return to stillness. And if you are brand new to practice, you're not trying to stop the mind. Your mind will not go empty, will not go blank. You will not think nothing. We're just going to sit and breathe. I'll say things periodically to either wake you up because you've fallen asleep or remind you that you're lost in thought and bring you back to the present moment. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever's comfortable. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after, compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakening. He's a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It's direct perception into the present moment. And very often that present moment is filled with conflict, chaos, challenges, difficulties. This is life. That's what we get. And so this practice is learning to be with these challenges and difficulties and conflicts as they arise. Many people spend their entire lives running from challenges and difficulties. That gets tiring. Spend your whole life running. Very often afraid to just sit with yourself. Most people aren't nearly as bad as you tend to tell yourselves you are. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life. And that's it. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, which is where we spend so much of our time, hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they would do this, wishing they would do that. So much time lost in other people's lives. It's hard enough to control your own choices and decisions, let alone try to control somebody else's. This is a time of year that many cultures have created this time for reflection, time for new things ahead. It's just another day. Every day is a time for reflection. And every day is a time for new things ahead. So pay attention to that right now. Reflect on what your life has been, what this year has been, what this morning has been. Become aware of all your thoughts, all your words, and all your actions. And if you don't like things, then change. It's that simple. Harder to do, but not impossible. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I always really just prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And for those joining virtually, again, welcome. Feel free as you are. There's a chat box on your screen somewhere. Feel free to say hello. If you have any questions, put them there, and I'll do my best to respond. So we'll use the rest of our brief time this morning and just open up to questions.
In most religions, it's Buddhism and Christianity, it's, how you act, what you think, what you say, what you do. But when someone gets dementia, that person kind of disappears and they're no longer responsible for their actions. So I'm kind of struggling with what is consciousness, what is that person? Is it something underneath all of that? Because they no longer have control over what they say, and they change. And what is underneath that goes on?
Well, let me just answer the simple question that everyone else has been trying to answer for thousands of years. The question, for those who didn't hear it, is, the way you phrased it, and I'm paraphrasing your words, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you said Buddhism, Christianity, most religions talk about what you think, what you say, what you do, the awareness of that, but what about dementia? And for those who have dementia, you said they no longer have the ability to control what they say. So what's underneath all of that? Where is that person? Yeah, that's kind of what you're asking. How many of you in this room have had control over what you've said your entire life? We'll start there. I understand the nature of your question that I absolutely will have no answer to, but I'm going to give you some responses to maybe think about it a little bit differently, right? Even if I said, this is who the person is, would that change anything?
Well, you think you know who the person is. And then when you see that, you don't know that person.
Okay, So what you just said, to repeat it for those who didn't hear it, you think you know who that person is, and then when you hear them, you think you don't know them at all. So what your question to me is really about is not who is the person really. It's about what is your interpretation of who they are. This is not about them. This is about you. We create, whether someone has dementia or not, and yes, these are very painful things to go through. Whether someone has dementia or not, we create a story about somebody in our lives and who they are. And this is the danger, is it's really, and I'm kind of taking this away from your question for a minute, just to point this out, and then I'll come back to that. It's really unfair for us to do that to people. We create stories in our heads about who we think someone is. And either we elevate them and put them on a pedestal and think they're these grand blah, blah, blah. And then they do something that completely alters the way we perceive them. And then we're like, oh, they're just a piece of crap. Or the opposite. We look at people and we think the worst of them. And then all of a sudden they do something kind. And well, that's just their one thing. They're really still just a piece of whatever. So we have these fixed ideas in our mind of who we think people are. Well, your question is, who are people really? And the Buddha taught, this also won't help you, but I'm going to say it anyways, that there is no self, permanent self. We look at people and places and things, and you've heard me say this for years, and we want to put a perfect box and label and description around who they are. We, whether we have dementia or not, are always changing. Right? I am not the person who did terrible things 20 years ago. I'm also not the person who may do something great this afternoon. Those are all just things we do. I'm not the person who may do something terrible this afternoon. And I'm not the person who maybe did something great 20 years ago. Who are we really? We're just a story we give to ourselves and to others. How we define people is not what matters. How we treat them is what matters. How we are with them is what matters. When people who don't have dementia are mean and angry and nasty towards you, we try to practice patience within safety, right? Keeping safety in mind, right? For those who are brand new to Buddhism, Buddhist practice does not mean that you're in a physical, emotional, mental, unhealthy space that you should stay there. Buddhist practice is not about being a doormat and allowing yourselves to be abused. The wisest thing and most compassionate thing is to remove yourself from that situation. This is just to clarify for those who might be new to Buddhism that may think that, well, if you're Buddhist, you're just supposed to let people harm you. No. You remove yourself from those situations. People who have dementia say and do very often incredibly harmful, painful things. And so we practice patience with their words and understand that that's what they're saying at this moment. Does it mean it's the truth? It's not about who they are, it's about who you are. And who you are is also always changing. And some days when you're dealing with people who are battling dementia or Alzheimer's, whatever, any sort of, illness, disease, some days are going to be much easier than others. Some days, if you're feeling in a happy, kind, compassionate, loving mood, you'll be okay with somebody lashing out at you who you know is not someone who would normally lash out at you. And some days when you're just having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, you're not going to be okay with that. That doesn't change who they are. It changes how we are responding. But ultimately, there is no inherent self as the Buddha taught. It doesn't mean we don't exist. It doesn't mean we're not here. It doesn't mean if we chop our arm off, it's not going to hurt. It's going to hurt. But we are completely different from how we perceive ourselves to be. So is everybody else. So the practice is to stop judging and labeling and giving people these definitions based on who we think they are. We don't want people doing that to us. So it's the best non-answer I got for you at this moment. Yeah. What else? It's also, last thing I'll say, I think for now, is it's also a great opportunity to practice removing and letting go of expectations. If anything, it's an opportunity to expect that you have no idea how they're going to be, and you can embrace that with the beginner's mind. And it's not fun, it's not pleasant, and it's painful. What else? Yeah.
Just a random question. Are there any Buddhist holidays like Christmas, like big celebrations in the Buddhist religion?
The question was, are there any Buddhist celebrations like Christmas or any holidays or anything? Every day is a Buddhist holiday. Haven't you learned anything in all these years? Every day is an opportunity to just celebrate life and breath and like, oh my, here we are, right? But to answer your question there, and ironically, if you Google Union Tribune and Dharma Bum Temple, we just had an article written on that. A couple of Christmas Eve actually came out about Buddhist holidays, Buddhist traditions. What you get is kind of a mixture of cultural holidays that are practiced by Buddhists in different countries. So you may see at a Buddhist monastery in Taiwan, for example, what looks like a big Buddhist celebration, but they're actually maybe celebrating a cultural holiday. But because it's being practiced by Buddhist monks or nuns or Buddhist lay people, they may see it as a Buddhist holiday. There is what they celebrate Bodhi Day, which they say is kind of the, and Vesak Day, really are kind of the two main celebrations where, well, that's actually not true. You also have the Katina, which is I always forget, is that the end of the rains retreat, right? Yeah. So you have Katina, which celebrates the end of like a 3-month period where they call it the rains retreat. And so at Metaphorist Monastery here, you can go up there and celebrate Katina, which is a great, coming to closure of those 3 months of the rains retreat from the time of the Buddha. This is San Diego, so other than today, we don't really get 3 months straight of rain. Vesak Day, you have the celebration of the birth, the death, and the day of awakening. So there's a couple, but it's not a huge thing. And I think what's really important is that, as a practitioner, Buddhist temples, Buddhist spaces, especially in a Western culture, right? As I often do, show of hands, how many of you in this room are actually Buddhist? Look around. As I always say, you got one hand yes and 2 other people like this because they're just not sure, right? So in Buddhist temples, in this culture, what you have are tons of people. How many of you celebrated Christmas a few days ago? That's like half of you in this room, right? So to me, the most beautiful part of the holidays from a Buddhist lens is to obviously just embrace and celebrate all the holidays that are out there.
I could be wrong, but there's also the Sattva days where you like practice the 8 precepts on like certain shades of the moon as well. Is that cultural? Or is that?
I'm not sure the Buddha taught to practice 8 precepts based on the shades of the moon. It doesn't mean it doesn't occur, right? But that's where you're looking at different cultures that do different traditions, for sure. See, it's always this idea of what did the Buddha actually teach? And then what do cultures do for 2,500 years with these teachings? And as Buddhism goes into a new culture, as Suzuki Roshi wrote, it can take 100 years for it to actually take root, and it actually meshes with local cultures. So why do you think Buddhism is so difficult in America? Because we have American culture, which is just about as opposite as it gets when it comes to Buddhist teachings. But it has to mesh with the local culture. It's not a dominating thing. It's not trying to take over. Buddhism went into China. You had Taoism, Confucianism, and Shintoism. So you have all of that meshing as well. But yeah, there are endless cultural practices. Truly. What else? Yeah.
Is there a liturgy that you follow? I know that Christian churches use it after your cycle of things, or is it random, or is it?
With regards to what? The question around, is there a liturgy that
Well,
you
this is my
follow?
first time being to this service.
Yeah.
Call it, for
Yeah.
want of a better word. So I'm just, or do you have a set plan? You follow?
Are you talking about me personally?
What you talk about.
I'm just making shit up every day.
That's what I'm asking.
That is my liturgy.
Right.
Yes.
So you don't have, there's no set program that you might get you into.
Oh God, no. A set program would destroy me. Yeah. No, there is no liturgy that I follow. Yeah. And in fact, even if you look at the nature of the Dharma Bum Temple for 17 years, everybody who leads, for the most part, it leads in that same manner, that they're sharing their individual approach and perspective on Buddhist teachings. But they're definitely not, I would say Bettina, who's been leading for us maybe the last 6-7 months, who does she does a beautiful, focuses on the 4 Brahma Viharas and a beautiful mindfulness practice on Wednesday nights. She's about as structured as it gets because she has like notes and stuff that she follows. But even there, from sitting with her enough, it's still very, very, Buddhism should be playful and not, in my opinion, not very structured and rigid. Are there Buddhist sutras that are recited at Buddhist temples around the world? Yes, but if you all showed up here and I gave you some sutra to recite and we just sat here in English or Mandarin or whatever language and recited it, you wouldn't get much from it. So, yeah, no liturgy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's like when people talk, when they come into Buddhism, they say like, yeah, I like Buddhism because I'm not, they'll say they're not into organized religion. And I'm like, well, great, because we're not organized or religious. So you'll be totally safe here. Yeah. What else? Questions?
I guess it's just, there are protocols and respective traditions even at Dharma Bum Temple. I guess I sort of, as someone who's still relatively new, I do see practices of bowing, placing sacred objects in certain manners, and you gave that wonderful Dharma talk about taking care of a temple. It wasn't about taking care of a building.
Right.
It was about taking care of a temple.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with that thought, other than
Yeah,
to
no,
say that there may not be like a liturgy, but there's definitely structure, respect, protocol. I don't know what the word is.
Yeah, I think that, no, and I appreciate your point that I think that just to kind of close the gap a little on the question and the comment is, for me as a practitioner, I have personally very sacred rituals that I do daily. I just don't lead those. I also think it's very sacred for a Buddhist temple and the people who use the temple, as I gave the Dharma talk last week that you're referring to, for the people who use the temple to know where the toilet paper and paper towels are, to be able to replace them, to care for the space. So I think there's protocols and respect for Buddhist temples, just like there should be protocols and respect for all spaces. And I think Buddhist temples are opportunities to learn, and I compared a Buddhist temple to a restaurant in a sense that they're completely different. But how beautiful would it be if we actually treated, first we have to learn how to care for our own personal space, right? That's why I talked about making your bed every day. I'm sure all of you are still doing that since I gave that talk about a month ago, right? So once we've moved beyond, which for a lot of people is very difficult, I was starting to say once we move beyond taking care of our own personal space, but very often, this was years ago, I still remember Vicky, who said, she would come here weekly and clean, but she won't clean her own house, right? And so there's a disconnect here, right? And the reality is a lot of people come to sacred spaces, whether it's a temple, yoga studio, whatever religious space, and there's a way that we behave and treat those places and the people in them. But very often we don't even treat our own home, our own family, our own friends, as well as we treat strangers. I mean, so many of you in this room are strangers. And look, as I always talk about, look how, for the most part, how nice and polite people are to everybody in this space. So I think those are the important aspects that you learn in a place like this. But then we have to carry it out. Because the people in this room, these are the same ones, as I always say, that cut you off in traffic. These are the same ones who are, annoying you on customer service calls. These are the same ones that are bugging you, when you're in the grocery store line. Like, they're all here. Why do you think you're all here? We're not here, myself included, because we're the calm, peaceful, happy ones. We're here because we recognize we're a mess. And we're trying to deal with that mess in a way that doesn't harm people. Because harming self and harming others sucks. So I think, back to your point, I ramble as usual, but I think there are definitely rituals that I've learned from a cultural perspective, a Taiwanese Buddhist practice, but I don't, for the most part, other than asking people to join palms when I, take refuge. I learned 17 years ago, 20 years ago when I started, that the cultural Buddhism doesn't fit so well into American culture for a large percentage of people. Meaning, if you all came in here and I put you in robes and had you bow and chant and offer incense every single day, most of you aren't coming back. Some of you, maybe 3 of you, right? I could identify which 3 you are, would be here. The rest would be like, yeah, not for me. So, yeah.
Well, that's interesting because I feel like that's, like you asked the question, who here is a Buddhist? And I almost feel like in our culture, we recognize that a Buddhist is in robes and does the whole thing.
Yeah.
But is there, I struggle with that sometimes too, because I'm like, I want to call myself a Buddhist, but obviously, I don't see it cutting lots of traffic or whatever it is.
Sure.
So
Buddhists also cut people off in traffic, just so you know.
Well, and I remember when it was still downtown, I went and there was a monk that came in and he had to talk about how he cut people off in traffic.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, it made me kind of feel more connected. Okay.
You know what Buddhists are?
Like,
You know what Buddhists are? Human.
right, exactly. But that's what I wonder is I almost have the guilt of calling myself a Buddhist because of those things. But
Sure.
it's I think other people have that hesitation
Yeah.
because they don't.
I think, someone asked the Dalai Lama years ago if this country needed more Buddhists. And he said, this world has enough Buddhists. We don't need more. This country needs people who are peaceful and happy, and therefore kind. And so I understand the nature of your kind of question/comment, which is what identifies someone as a Buddhist. And sure, in Buddhism, are there formal rituals and things like that you can go through? Get Dharma names, go through a formal ritual, take refuge, abide by precepts, all those types of things? Sure. But if it doesn't mean anything to you, my master always said you could shave your head and put on a robe, that doesn't make you a monk or a nun. And I found that to be the most beautiful teaching that, for me, I still practice and share, that I'm not personally interested, which is why I always kind of dismiss this stuff, because in our culture, we're so wrapped up in am I being the right Buddhist? Be the kindest, most loving Christian that you can be. Be the kindest, most loving Catholic, Muslim, Mormon, Jewish, whatever else I'm forgetting. That's what it means to be a Buddhist. Just because you get a Dharma name and take some ritual doesn't make you a Buddhist. It makes you a person with a Dharma name who went through a ritual. And this is what my masters taught me, especially in a new culture. But to point out very clearly, if that wasn't that clear, Buddhists do not equal monks and nuns, meaning there are Buddhists who are not, let me rephrase that. There are Buddhists who are not monks and nuns. You don't have to be a monk or nun to be a Buddhist. Yeah. And we're also in a culture where people are used to seeing one religion and then either identifying or leaving it and converting to something else, right? Buddhism isn't that way. most people I know are Christian, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, Mormon, whatever it might be, pagan, and they practice Buddhism. I think for this culture, it's more important that we look at it as practicing the teachings of Buddha, which is loving kindness and compassion. That's all it is. Keep your religion or abandon it, that's up to you, but don't worry about being Buddhist. Yeah. What else?
Do you have a Dharma name, and if so, what is it?
Many,
Like formally given?
yes. You can see how much they mean to me.
Collect them.
I collect them, yes. Because the more Dharma names you have, the more enlightened you are, It's like sitting in the front row. See, these people are more enlightened, and as you get more advanced, you move to the front because you hear the Dharma quicker, yeah. It's such an American thing to like, and I'm not picking on you, I mean, you've heard me say this a million times, I would have said this anyways, but I was gonna let it go until you said that. It's such an American thing to like want more. The root cause of suffering, according to Buddhist teachings, is craving and desire. An intro to Buddhism is not enough for most people. The heart of this practice that the Buddha taught for 45 years is the Four Noble Truths. To want more than that, to me, is not healthy or wise. To hear the Four Noble Truths for 10 years and think you know them, the thought of, I know the Four Noble Truths, if you have that thought in your mind, based on Buddhist teachings, once you have the thought of I know, that right there means you do not know. Read the Diamond Sutra, right? The Four Noble Truths. The first one is life is filled with dukkha, suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. As I always say, if you come here on 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning, unless you were dragged here, you pretty much embrace the fact that you're going to struggle a lot in your life. The second one is the cause, or as I'm going to try to remind myself to keep saying, because I just read it again recently and I like it better, the origin, as Thich Nhat Hanh referred to it as, the origin of suffering. Most people can't even get through this. Well, Four Noble Truths, I got that. Where's the next teaching? Do you deeply understand the origin of your suffering? No. So why would we even want to go past that? Understand the origin, the nature of your suffering is the second noble truth. You could spend your entire life exploring that, truly. Understand why we suffer. The third noble truth is the cessation of suffering, the ending, the liberation, freedom from craving and desire. Are we there? My God, no. I shouldn't speak for any of you, I'm just talking about myself. And then the fourth is the path, the Eightfold Path. Correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. All available on Google for free. Very systematically laid out for you. Right? You can follow these steps. And for me as a practitioner, that is what I'll spend the rest of my life practicing. That's it. Because that is hard enough. And for me to understand the origin of suffering, I always say the cause of suffering. That's what I learned years ago, and I've been saying that for years and years, the cause of suffering. When we say cause of suffering, to me, once I read origin, all of a sudden it shifted things, because cause almost looks like blame. When I hear the word cause, I didn't think about this until just a couple days ago. But a cause of the suffering is almost like we want to blame something or someone, as if it's just, you can identify it as one single moment in time. But the word origin, to me, all of a sudden I read origin out, and it just completely blew my mind about how I saw the second noble truth. The origin of my suffering begins with birth. And every single thing that I have been shown and exposed to and thought and done from birth until this moment. The origin of all suffering is there. That's where the exploration begins. And so that's why I always downplay being Buddhist and Dharma names and rituals and things like that, because as Americans, we want more. Well, it's got to be in a robe or with a shaved head, or you have to bow or chant or do all this stuff. Practice is to understand why we suffer and to do things that help us suffer less. Because if we suffer less, what does that mean? Others will suffer less. And they deserve that, as do we. So, with that, I'll close. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. All right, a few quick announcements before y'all head out. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who leave, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. Many of the people who lead aren't even Buddhist. Go figure. We have free classes every night, different people leading from different Buddhist traditions, which is their practice. Every Thursday, we've now switched the time to 4:30. Every Thursday at 4:30, we do a food redistribution program. I still think it's probably the best practice around here. We make gourmet vegetarian meals, also known as peanut butter and jelly. We put them together and we feed people who sleep on the streets every night. So anytime you think your life sucks and you kind of lack gratitude for all that's going on in your life, feed people who sleep on the sidewalk, and it tends to put things into perspective. First Saturday of the month, we have a day of silence retreat, a half day, so it's 4 hours of silence. That'll be coming up next Saturday. So if 20 minutes of silence is absolute torture for you, then I strongly recommend you try 4 hours. To my knowledge, everyone has survived to this point. Other than that, tomorrow night, tomorrow, right? Tomorrow night, tomorrow's New Year's, Tomorrow night, we have our 18th annual Dharma Bum Temple New Year's Eve celebration. It's a wild party. 7 o'clock, we do a vegetarian potluck. At 9 o'clock, I'll do a history of the Dharma Bum Temple. And about 11:30, we come up here and do a 20-minute silent meditation into the new year. So the whole evening is not silent, just the last 20 minutes meditation practice. Some people come at 7 and they're home and in bed by 9 o'clock. Some people just come at 9, and then some people show up around 11:30 just to sit. So you're welcome to come at any point throughout the evening. There's always a ton of people in and out all night. So it's, as I often say, if you've never done a silent and sober New Year, here's your opportunity to get them both out of the way at the same time, and you'll probably still survive. So
What time can we start bringing things?
7.
7.
Yeah, 7 o'clock. Thank you. Yeah,
Is there a sign-up sheet for the potluck, or people?
just show up. Yeah, we'll probably end up with like 1,000 cookies, but just show up. No, it always tends to work out all right somehow. Who knows? We'll have some backup stuff in case we do end up with just 1,000 cookies. But we'll be all right. So thanks all for being here. I wish you well. We'll see you soon.